leave a racist judge speechless. She saw a defendant. But what she discovered was something that made her jaw drop. In a courtroom built on bias, one envelope turned the balance of power. And what that letter said? It changed everything. This is a story about courage, prejudice, and the moment when truth flipped injustice upside down. Location: Chambers County Courthouse, Alabama. Time: 2:10 p.m., Friday. She thought it was just a letter, until she read the first line. Then her face turned white. Inside a traditional Southern courtroom with wood-paneled walls and polished floors, the air felt thick with tension. The ceiling fan turned slowly above, doing little to ease the heat of the late afternoon. The sounds of creaking benches and shuffled papers echoed faintly against the walls. At the front of the room stood Jamal Rivers, a 13-year-old black boy, his shoulders squared despite his small frame. He looked dwarfed by the room's towering architecture. His second-hand suit, pressed neatly the night before, was a size too big. The sleeves drooped slightly past his wrists. His shoes were scuffed, but they had been carefully cleaned and shined that morning. Judge Clarissa Beecham presided from the bench. She was known throughout the county for her cold demeanor and harsh sentences. Her robe was crisp, her gray hair pinned tightly into a bun. She peered over her glasses, squinting as if trying to see through Jamal rather than at him. "Is this the defendant?" she asked, her voice sharp and certain. Jamal took a breath, his chin lifting just slightly. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. Murmurs swept through the courtroom like a sudden breeze. Some spectators shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances. A few looked on with narrowed eyes. Skepticism hung heavy in the air. But a few faces showed something different. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Jamal's public defender sat beside him, nervously tapping a pencil against a legal pad. Across the aisle, the prosecutor organized a stack of papers, confident in their case. But Jamal had come prepared. In the inner pocket of his oversized coat, tucked securely against his chest, was an envelope. A plain white envelope, sealed the night before. It held more than words. It held truth. Truth that had been ignored. Truth no one had bothered to ask for. Truth that could change everything. He felt the weight of the room pressing in on him, but he didn't waver. He remembered what his grandmother always told him: "Stand tall, even when the world tries to make you small." So he did. This wasn't just a courtroom, it was a stage. And Jamal wasn't just a defendant. He was a boy who had something to say. Have you ever been judged by where you stood, not who you were? Jamal lived in a rundown 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The paint peeled from the door frame, and the railing on the stairs outside wobbled if you leaned too hard on it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, and the walls carried the sounds of neighbors arguing, babies crying, and televisions left on too long. He shared the apartment with his aunt and 2 younger cousins. After losing both his parents in a car crash when he was only 9, Jamal had to grow up fast. He became the man of the house before he even hit puberty. He helped with homework, changed diapers, cooked frozen dinners, and kept the fridge organized so nothing spoiled. His aunt, Tasha, worked double shifts as a nurse assistant at the county hospital. She left before sunrise and came home after dark. Her back always ached, her eyes always tired. But she never stopped smiling when she saw Jamal reading to the kids or straightening up the living room. They didn't have much. Meals were shared off a single hot plate. The microwave was held shut with duct tape. Some nights the lights flickered. Other nights they went out completely. They lit candles and played guessing games in the dark until power returned. But through it all, Jamal never missed school. He woke early, ironed his shirt with the back of a warm pan, and walked the mile-long route, rain or shine. He sat in the front row of every class, quiet, focused, always listening. Jamal was brilliant. A quiet kid who always had a book tucked in his backpack, usually one far above his grade level. He borrowed novels from the school library and tucked them under his pillow at night. He read science magazines in the bathroom and scribbled vocabulary words onto scraps of paper he found. He taught himself computer programming on a cracked tablet they got from a church donation. With borrowed Wi-Fi from the library down the street, he learned how to code. By 12, he was writing simple apps. By 13, he could fix almost any computer glitch his teachers ran into. His teachers noticed. They whispered about him in the lounge. "That boy is a genius." He corrected me on a Civil War date last week, and he was right. If he gets the right chance, he's going to change the world. But none of that brilliance mattered the night Jamal was walking home from the store, hoodie on, earbuds in, receipt in his pocket, the sound of screeching tires, flashing red and blue lights, voices yelling. He froze, hands visible, eyes wide. The police were responding to a robbery report. A suspect had fled on foot. The description was vague. Hoodie, male, black. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin. They pinned him to the sidewalk, cuffed him, took his words as excuses. No one asked about the receipt. No one checked his backpack, where a math textbook lay open beside a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. They asked questions without listening to the answers. They took him downtown, booked him, called it probable cause. Now, here he was, standing in court. Suit too big, shoes too small, truth tucked inside his coat. Have you ever had your light hidden behind someone else's shadow of bias? The moment Judge Clarissa Beecham laid eyes on Jamal, her demeanor shifted. Her posture stiffened, her gaze narrowed, and her voice turned cold. "What's the charge?" she snapped, barely glancing at the file in front of her. The prosecutor stood clearing his throat. "Loitering, Your Honor. He was found near the scene of a robbery and matched the initial description." Judge Beecham raised an eyebrow. "Initial description? What was that exactly?" The prosecutor hesitated. "Male, black, wearing a hoodie." Jamal stood still, his hands by his side, his face calm. His court-appointed lawyer spoke up. "Your Honor, Jamal has no prior record. He's an honor student and helps run his school's math club." Before he could say more, Judge Beecham cut him off. "They never do until they get caught." The words echoed. She leaned forward. "Tell me, Jamal, what were you really doing out there?" Jamal looked up, meeting her eyes. "I was walking home from tutoring. I stay after school to help with math club." A few chuckles came from the back of the courtroom. Someone whispered loudly, "Sure, he does." The judge didn't smile. Her pen tapped against her folder. "That's a new one." She stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for something behind his face. Then she gave a heavy, theatrical sigh. "Anything else to say before I make my ruling?" The room was silent. Jamal swallowed hard. Then slowly, carefully, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The bailiff stepped forward instinctively. "It's just paper," Jamal said quietly, pulling out an envelope. He held it up. "I have something you should read." His lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently, "What is that?" "Proof," Jamal whispered back, "of everything." The judge raised a hand. "Bring it here." Jamal walked to the bench. His steps were steady, his grip firm. He handed her the envelope. She opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. Inside were letters, from teachers, from the school principal, from the math club coordinator, all typed and signed, all affirming Jamal's character, his whereabouts, and his integrity. There was also a dated flyer from the math club meeting, and a note from the tutor he had been with that night. Time-stamped, verified. Judge Beecham's face tightened. She shuffled the pages twice, as if hoping they would say something different the second time. Silence stretched. Then she looked back at Jamal. Have you ever been underestimated so deeply that it felt like your truth wouldn't matter at all? The envelope was plain, just a white, creased rectangle that had traveled from pocket to pocket. But inside it held something powerful. Judge Beecham took it with a sigh, half expecting a scribbled excuse or a meaningless note. Her fingers tore the seal slowly. She opened the flap, glanced down at the first page, and froze. Her sarcastic smirk faded. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the hum of the ceiling fan. She read the heading aloud, confusion creeping into her voice. Office of the Mayor of Chambers County. Her eyes flicked back to Jamal, then to the paper again. She began reading. The lines described an incident 2 months prior. A fire in a low-income apartment complex. A panicked mother had screamed from a second-floor window. Jamal, walking home from school, had dashed into the building. He climbed the staircase through the smoke, helped a toddler out of the window, and stayed until emergency responders arrived. This says you saved a baby from a fire?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamal nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He kept his hands at his side, calm, controlled. "I stayed after, too. Helped raise money to replace the building's smoke alarms. I wrote the mayor to ask if they could match the donations." She flipped to the second page. This letter is a nomination form. A nomination for a State Youth Leadership Award." "Yes, ma'am. My science teacher submitted it. They said they sent the letter to the school to give to me, but I never saw it." The gallery shifted. Whispered voices carried across the courtroom. The bailiff took a step forward, squinting at the papers. Judge Beecham turned to the defense attorney. "Did you know about this?" The attorney looked stunned. "No, Your Honor. Jamal never mentioned it." Jamal spoke up, because nobody asked. The words settled like a weight in the room. Nobody asked. Not the police, not the intake officer, not the prosecutor, not even the lawyer assigned to defend him. The judge looked back at the papers, then at Jamal. "You carry all of this, and you were still treated like a suspect." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence said more than words could. She stacked the letters gently and slid them to the side. "I'll be taking this under review," she said, her tone more neutral now. "This changes things." Jamal gave a small nod. His fingers clenched slightly at his sides. The courtroom buzzed. Reporters whispered. People in the gallery leaned forward, suddenly seeing someone new. "Has your truth ever shocked someone who thought they already knew you?" The courtroom shifted. You could feel the energy change. What had once been stiff and skeptical now felt different. Warmer, unsure, shaken. The wooden benches creaked as people leaned in. A woman in the back dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man cleared his throat, but said nothing. Jamal's lawyer blinked in disbelief, mouth slightly open. The pages of his notepad fluttered as he nervously adjusted them. Even the prosecutor, once so confident in the charge, looked down and away, his jaw tight. Judge Beecham set down the letter slowly. Her fingers trembled, just barely, as she adjusted her glasses. Her voice, which had once barked commands and assumptions, softened to something more human. "It appears," she began, choosing her words with care, "that we've made an assumption." The silence grew deeper. "An assumption," she repeated, "that led us down the wrong path." Her eyes traveled across the courtroom, then landed back on Jamal. "This young man is not only innocent," she said, her voice now steady. "He's an example of what we should be protecting, not prosecuting." Jamal stood still, not proud, not triumphant, just steady, like someone who had been waiting for the world to finally catch up. The judge took a breath. She turned slightly toward him. "I owe you more than an apology," she said. "I owe you the truth." She paused. "I was wrong." Gasps filled the room. One person clapped, tentatively, then another. Then a ripple of applause grew as people rose to their feet. Jamal didn't move. He just looked at the judge, nodding once. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. But in that moment, something far more important had been broken than a case. It was a cycle of assumption, of bias, of not asking, of thinking that dignity had to be earned rather than given. Jamal walked back to the defense table, collected his papers, and tucked the envelope back into his coat. The bailiff stepped aside with a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. As he walked out of the courtroom, heads turned, but not in judgment, in awe. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, questions flying. But Jamal didn't speak right away. He looked at the sky, the same sky he had walked under every day to and from school. The same sky that had watched him grow through grief, through silence, through fire and falsehood. He closed his eyes, then opened them, and finally he spoke. "I was never lost. They just didn't look hard enough." Have you ever witnessed a moment so raw it rewrote the story in real time? By that night, the local news stations had the story. Judge mistakes boy for criminal, reads letter, finds hero. The headline splashed across the 6 o'clock broadcast. By 10, reporters stood outside the courthouse with lights and microphones. By midnight, clips of the moment Judge Beecham read Jamal's letter were already circulating online. In the video, you could see her face, her eyes scanning the letter, her shoulders shifting, her mouth tightening, then dropping. The shift in expression became the still frame for a dozen articles. By morning, national media had picked it up. Boy saves baby, then saves himself in courtroom twist. From defendant to example, Jamal Rivers changes the narrative. The stories ran on every major platform. TV anchors played the clip of the judge's voice cracking as she admitted she was wrong. One headline simply read, "She turned white." Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Celebrities retweeted. Youth advocates spoke out. Comment sections filled with messages like, "This kid deserves the world," and "This is what grace under fire looks like." The moment became a symbol. It wasn't just about Jamal anymore. It was about every kid misjudged. Every assumption made before a word was spoken. Every time the system forgot to ask. Jamal was invited to speak on multiple morning shows and podcasts. His aunt stood by him beaming with pride. On one program, the host asked, "Why did you write that letter?" Jamal sat still for a second, then said, "I didn't write it to defend myself. I wrote it to help others understand where I'm from." His voice was quiet, but every word landed. In another interview, he said, "People forget. We don't all get the chance to explain. Sometimes the story gets written for us." The courtroom footage became more than just a viral clip. It became a reference point. Schools showed it during assemblies. Teachers used it in empathy training. Counselors used it to talk about bias. Meanwhile, advocates started calling for a formal review of Judge Beecham's past rulings. Civil rights groups requested audits. Former defendants came forward. A pattern began to form. The court system was forced to pause. Jamal didn't speak on that part. He didn't demand anything. He just kept showing up to school, walking his cousins home, helping his aunt fold laundry. But his presence carried power now. He had shown the world something they rarely get to see, a child rising above the narrative written for him. A kid who became the headline but never let it define him. Have you ever seen a moment spark a movement? Jamal went back to school the following Monday, but everything felt different. The same building that once made him feel small now echoed with applause. Students gathered at the front entrance to greet him. Some held signs. Others simply clapped. Phones recorded every moment. Inside, his teachers welcomed him with warm smiles. Some gave him letters. Others offered quiet apologies. One teacher stopped him in the hallway and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." In the classroom, his usual seat at the back had been taken. But instead of asking him to move, the students shifted. They made space. They made sure he sat front and center. The principal made an announcement over the intercom. "We're proud to have Jamal Rivers in our school. His courage, dignity, and strength reflect the best of who we hope to be." Every head turned toward him. But this time, it wasn't with suspicion. It was with pride. Outside of school, the community responded in ways no one expected. A local business owner started a GoFundMe to support Jamal's future. The goal was $5,000. In 2 days, it passed 50. By the end of the week, it surpassed 100,000. Donations came in with notes like, "For the future leader," "Thank you for reminding us what bravery looks like," and "I want my son to grow up like you." The mayor invited Jamal and his aunt to lunch at City Hall. They sat in the large conference room usually reserved for policy meetings and press briefings. The mayor shook his hand and said, "You've changed how we look at leadership." Jamal didn't say much. He just nodded and said, "Thank you for listening." News crews captured it all. Photos of Jamal at a table surrounded by city officials, his aunt smiling proudly beside him. Interviewers asked her how it felt. She wiped her eyes and said, "He's always been like this." Now the world knows, too. Neighbors stopped by the apartment to drop off groceries, school supplies, and notes. Local artists painted murals in his honor. One showed Jamal holding a book in one hand and a flame in the other, symbolizing knowledge and courage. One bakery even created a cupcake flavor named after him, vanilla and lemon with a gold star on top. They called it Jamal's Light. And yet, Jamal stayed grounded. He still woke up early, still walked his cousins to school, still helped with dinner and took out the trash. But his walk was different now. Straight, stronger. He knew who he was, and now so did everyone else. Have you ever seen someone get the spotlight they always deserved? Jamal stood at the podium of the Youth Leadership Summit, his blazer pressed, his voice steady. Hundreds of young people filled the auditorium, eyes on him, waiting. He took a breath. The scariest part wasn't jail, he said. It was knowing no one was listening. The room went silent, then applause, then a standing ovation. Jamal's words rippled beyond the walls of that hall. News outlets quoted the line. Social media echoed it. For many, it became a rallying cry. Soon after, national youth justice organizations reached out. They didn't just want to interview him, they wanted him to consult, to share his perspective, to sit at their tables. Jamal accepted, not for the spotlight, but for the kids who were still invisible, still unheard, still assumed guilty before anyone asked their name. He spoke at panels, helped draft youth equity frameworks, reviewed classroom training modules on bias and assumption. He asked hard questions. He told uncomfortable truths. And people listened. In his hometown, the mayor's office announced a new scholarship program, the Jamal Rivers Future Leaders Award. It would support students facing adversity, recognizing not just academic excellence, but resilience and community impact. The first scholarship went to a girl who had translated for her parents through an immigration hearing. The second, to a boy who volunteered at a shelter every weekend. Jamal attended both ceremonies. He handed out the certificates. But even as recognition grew, he stayed grounded. He still lived in the same apartment, still helped his aunt with laundry, still walked his cousins to school. One afternoon, a letter arrived at their door. Judge Beecham's name was printed at the top. Inside, she wrote, "Jamal, I've spent my career trying to uphold the law. But it took one moment in court to realize I was enforcing it without always understanding justice. Your strength changed me. I hope you'll accept my apology." Jamal read it twice. He folded it carefully, then said to his aunt, "I accept it, but I'm not stopping." She smiled. "I know, baby. I wouldn't expect you to." He kept the letter in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even those who misjudge can grow, that truth has power, and that sometimes the hardest things we live through can open doors for someone else. Have you ever turned your pain into purpose? Today, Jamal runs a nonprofit dedicated to educating young people about their legal rights. The office is small, but full of life. There are shelves of books, a chalkboard wall for brainstorming, and a bulletin board covered in scholarship deadlines, internship flyers, and handwritten thank you notes from teens across the state. The organization doesn't just teach laws. It helps kids build resumes, write essays, apply for scholarships, and shape their futures. Workshops are held weekly. Guest speakers visit monthly. Every chair in every room has been filled more than once by a young person who thought no one cared about their story, until Jamal did. The letter that changed everything? It now hangs in a simple black frame on the wall beside his desk. A few inches away, another frame holds a photo of a group of students he helped earn their first college acceptances. Next to it, a picture of his younger self, standing outside the courthouse in his oversized suit, hands by his side. Visitors often ask about the letter. He tells them they thought it was just a letter. I knew it was proof of who I am. Every day he passes it, not as a memory of the hardest day, but as a reminder of what followed. His team includes youth mentors, school counselors, and volunteers who once sat in the same seats as the students they now guide. Jamal still walks into classrooms, still speaks at conferences, still meets kids one-on-one to tell them they matter. He answers their questions. He listens to their pain. He reminds them that being misunderstood doesn't mean being wrong. His nonprofit has grown steadily. Local grants, private donors, partnerships with schools, but the mission has never changed: to teach, to uplift, to protect, and to remind every young person your story matters. When people ask what he's most proud of, Jamal doesn't point to awards or bank balances. He points to the wall, to the letter, and to the faces in the photos beside it, because that one letter, tucked into a too-big coat on a courtroom floor, became the foundation of something larger. It started with silence, then a voice, then a movement. Now, a legacy. If you believe one voice, one story, and one letter can change the world, share this, because the next Jamal is already writing his. In the fluorescent-lit corner of a police interrogation room, a young black boy faced suspicion, ridicule, and fear. A white officer accused him of kidnapping, without a shred of evidence. But what the boy carried in his backpack didn't just silence the room. It shattered every assumption in a single heartbeat. And when the truth came out, even the officer's hands trembled. This is a story about injustice, instinct, and the raw power of one act of courage that flipped an entire narrative upside down. Location: Midtown Police Station, Ohio. Time: 4:17 p.m. Thursday. "Officer, I swear I didn't kidnap him," he cried. But no one believed him until he unzipped the backpack. The camera would open on a small, cold interrogation room. The walls were gray and bare. A single buzzing fluorescent light flickered above. In the center, a scratched metal table reflected the tension in the air. At one end of the table sat a 12-year-old black boy in a faded hoodie. His name was Elijah. His shoulders were tense. His eyes darted from the officer to the door, then down to the backpack he held tightly in his lap. He clutched it so hard his knuckles turned white. Across from him, Officer Daniels stood with his arms crossed, leaning forward. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Whose baby is that?" Elijah didn't speak right away. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he whispered, "He's not kidnapped." I swear Officer Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Then why were you carrying a baby down the street at 6 in the morning?" Elijah looked down again. "I was trying to help." But the officer didn't hear that. Not really. All he saw was a boy in a hoodie. All he saw was skin. All he saw was suspicion. There were forms to fill, boxes to check, stories already written. In this room, facts didn't matter. Not yet. Only assumptions did. The camera would linger on Elijah's face. Fear, confusion, determination. All packed into a silence that begged someone to listen. Have you ever been accused before anyone knew the facts? Elijah lived in a crumbling apartment complex with moldy ceilings and thin walls. The hallway light flickered constantly, and the heat barely worked in winter. The sound of arguments, distant sirens, and leaky faucets became the background music of his life. He shared a twin mattress with his older sister, Tasha, who stepped up to raise him after their mother passed away. She was just 19, juggling 2 jobs, waiting tables at a diner and restocking shelves overnight at a grocery store, just to keep them going. They didn't have much: second-hand clothes, off-brand cereal, and sometimes no Wi-Fi. Their fridge was old and loud, their kitchen sink backed up weakly, and the stairs outside creaked dangerously. But Elijah made the best of it. He washed his hoodie in the sink, studied by flashlight during blackouts, and never complained. He had a routine: school, homework, helping Tasha cook when she had the energy, then reading whatever he could get his hands on. Despite the hardship, Elijah was the top student in his class. Science was his favorite subject. He borrowed textbooks from the library, watched old documentaries on a cracked tablet, and dreamed of becoming a pediatrician. "Kids deserve doctors who look like them," he once told his teacher. His teachers called him brilliant. He corrected typos on the whiteboard, solved math problems without a calculator, and asked questions that made adults pause. He once stayed after class to help another student with fractions, even though no one asked him to. His teachers praised his potential in staff meetings. But brilliance didn't change his situation. He still walked through metal detectors every morning, still got followed in stores, still saw people clutch their bags when he passed. He was quiet, polite, and kind. The kind of kid who offered his lunch to classmates who forgot theirs, who helped clean up the classroom even when it wasn't his mess, who held doors open and said thank you. He knew what it meant to be overlooked, so he went out of his way to make others feel seen. At home, Elijah helped his sister fold laundry and made sure she rested when her shifts ran long. When the power was shut off for 3 days, he made shadow puppets for his niece by flashlight and told her stories to distract her from the dark. But none of that mattered to the world that only saw his skin. He learned to move carefully, to speak softly, to keep his hands visible, to smile when he felt afraid. Tasha always reminded him, you can't afford to get angry, even when you're right. And still, that day came the day when all his caution couldn't shield him. He was walking home like always, backpack on, shoes worn thin. He had one thing on his mind, making it back safely. He had just picked up a few groceries for his sister. He had a loaf of bread and a small carton of milk. His backpack was zipped shut, and his headphones were in his pocket. He took the route he always took, the well-lit street, the one with the least traffic. He didn't expect flashing lights, didn't expect the officer to pull over, didn't expect to be surrounded, questioned, or misunderstood. He never expected to end up in an interrogation room. Have you ever tried to do everything right and still been treated like you were wrong? A passerby saw Elijah walking briskly down the sidewalk, a baby tucked tightly into his arms. His hoodie was pulled low over his head, and his backpack bounced against his side with every step. It was early morning, the streets still mostly quiet. From across the street, a woman froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. 911. What's your emergency? There's a black kid running with a baby, she said quickly. I think he's kidnapping him. Within minutes, a patrol car screeched around the corner. Sirens, flashing lights, tires skidding. Elijah froze. He turned slowly, startled by the noise. I didn't do anything, he cried. The baby stirred in his arms, letting out a soft whimper. Officer Daniels jumped from the car before it came to a complete stop. Put the baby down and step away, he barked. Elijah hesitated. He's not. Before he could finish, the officer lunged. He grabbed Elijah by the arm and slammed him against the brick wall of the corner store. The baby let out a sharp cry as a second officer